Dr. Steven A Wright is a highly accomplished professional with expertise in business, engineering and law. His book, Ethics, Law and Technology, Navigating Technology Adoption Challenges, is a comprehensive resource for professionals in all sectors, addressing ethical and legal complexities in our rapidly evolving technological landscape. And Dr. Steven is on the line with us here. How are you today?
Hello, good to be with you.
So, what is the main focus of the book, Ethics, Law and Technology Adaptation?
Well, I'm looking in the book at the problems of technology ethics, and this generally comes around when we're talking about new technologies and the adoption of new technologies. So, rather than focus on the technology aspect as being some sort of vague and rather frightening inanimate thing, I tend to focus more on the people who are using the technology. What are they doing to encourage people to adopt it? What are they thinking about when they adopt it? What kinds of issues do the people have when they use the new technology?
So how does the book help people navigate those complexities?
I start with a general overview of what ethics is.
Yes.
It's kind of almost a tautology, but everyone tends to talk about ethics, but really not having a good background on what it is. So I go through a couple of different ethical frameworks that I then use in the rest of the book in terms of analyzing particular problems. So I start with a sort of consequential ethics, then a more duty-focused or deontic approach to ethics. Look also at some virtue ethics frameworks as well as more collectivist approaches.
So what actually is ethics?
The dictionary definition has it as a branch of metaphysics, but that doesn't explain anything. For most people, ethics has a big overlap with morality. And both are concerned with helping you find the right choices when confronted with a particularly an unfamiliar situation. So I would distinguish the two in that morality tends to be more associated with particular religions, whereas ethics has a little less of the religious flavor necessarily being tied into it.
Is ethics within technology becoming more spoken about? Because if I've got the definition of ethics right, I think data protection is kind of a big part of that. And in recent years, that's becoming more and more talked about with certain companies.
Well, data protection and artificial intelligence, I guess, is the big technology issues these days. But it's not just the software side of things. It's also things like biotech. There's probably a bit more of a history of professional engagement with, biotech ethics than there has been in the software field. But it's kind of a technology independent thing. But certainly the software related topics are fairly topical at the moment.
In the book, you speak about the clash sometimes between new technologies and old laws, which I suppose is something that it depends on what the examples are, but you maybe wouldn't expect would happen because maybe old laws wouldn't be written for what technology can do.
True. When they wrote old laws, the new technologies did not exist. But the court system's very good at finding ways to apply
Yes.
And so from a legal or a policy perspective, there's sort of a balancing act of when is it sufficient to just stick with the existing law and let the existing court systems do their thing, and when do you need to have a new law or a new policy in place? And so that's kind of a balancing act as to when that becomes worthwhile, because there's obviously costs and priorities around which laws to introduce and so forth. So,
of course, you mentioned artificial intelligence earlier, and there's a lot of talk at the moment about creating new laws for that, because if it continues on the path it's going, it could be potentially dangerous. Some people may view it as.
Yes, there are a number of recent legal initiatives, and there are actually some bits of international law treaties that talk about artificial intelligence. So it's not a new topic, although it seems to have gotten a lot of buzz lately.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's a little bit of I don't know if fear-mongering is quite the right word, but yes, there can certainly be overreactions, both in terms of overreacting and killing off new technologies. But on the other hand, you need to strike a balance where you provide adequate safety measures as well.
So why should people care about the kind of ethics and law within technology?
Two answers. There's the legal answer. People should worry about the law because somebody will wish to enforce it against them.
Yes.
Whether that's the power of the state or other folks enforcing their end of their contracts. Both of those give you reason to care about the legal issues. But ethics and the law are let's say, well acquainted with each other, but not always consistent.
Yes.
And so you may have reason to be concerned about ethical implications if you are involved with promoting a particular product or technology. You might be concerned not just about the letter of the law, but also making sure that you and your company's positions are defensible from an ethical perspective. Are your competitors, for example, going to attack you with some sort of ethical argument as to why their product's better than yours, or similar sort of competitive positioning?
Yeah.
So it's not always the arguments can be made for lots of different reasons to make it that way.
Yeah, because I suppose it's not just following the letter of the law. It's, as you say, doing ethical things, because your reputation or your image or whatever can be damaged, rightly or wrongly, if you do things that are perfectly legal but maybe unwise.
Yes, you can run into lots of problems if you don't consider the sort of ethical perspectives that your other stakeholders care about. And you can have the reverse too. You can have people doing sort of virtue signaling things on a false basis. So, the sort of greenwashing idea of trying to pretend you're very ecologically sensitive when you're really not. Or it doesn't just have to be an environmental issue. It could be whatever kind of topic. If you're trying to present your ethical position in one way, and that's really not where your company or organization is, that's another kind of issue that you can run into. It's not just a private industry issue as well. I mean, it runs into all sorts of public and political issues as well.
How do you get around the greenwashing thing as a company? Because if I think of a particular company here without naming them, there's a company I've seen doing some greenwashing, but they can't be a green company because that would defeat the whole point of where they get their money from.
It's hard to. It would be hard for me to provide a particular strategy without getting more specific. But let me just suggest this comes back to whether you want to position ethical arguments as a sword or a shield. So it's perhaps very easy for somebody, perhaps even a non-governmental organization, to accuse some larger company of unethical practices for all sorts of reasons. Whether that's environmentalism, child labor laws, take your pick. But if you're a large company or even another country, how do you defend yourself against that? Because what you're doing may actually be perfectly legal in the country where you're doing it. It may well be perfectly compliant with all sorts of international laws. and yet you're being accused of being unethical by these people who aren't actually involved in the situation. They're not parties to a particular contract with you. They're not in any way empowered by your employees or whatever on the ground.
Yes.
So it's like, who's this do-gooder that's coming in and saying you're not doing good? And it's a very awkward sort of situation for companies in that situation, and for countries as well. But yeah, it that's doesn't mean that bad things can't happen. I mean, there's certainly a role for whistleblowers exposing unsavory practices.
Is there anything in the book that maybe gives advice to individuals who don't have a business, or even just people within smaller businesses?
So I tried to target the book to three general audiences. So one was lawyers, one was business professionals that are worried about how to encourage adoption of their technology-based products. But the other is more general audience is towards technologists. They're a little bit better positioned than consumers generally to understand what's the potential consequences of what they're doing. And most, well, it would be nice to have advice for consumers. That's in general, not all technologies are targeted to consumers. They get a lot of press, but a lot of technologies get adopted by other companies. So it's sort of a more of a business to business issue as well.
Do you think businesses care about ethics at the end of the day, or are they only going to be ethical when they start losing revenue as a result of public reaction to it?
Well, that's a perfectly good reason to be ethical, right? If your stakeholders care about particular issues, then that's a good reason to modify your behavior if that's appropriate to I don't know what the right word is, mollify, assuage those concerns from those constituents. So, those could be customers or potential customers. It could be potential employees. It could be regulators. It could be all sorts of other stakeholders involved in particular cases.
Well, of course, this book is called Ethics, Law and Technology Adoption. Are you working on any more books at the moment?
I do have a couple more in process, but I don't have the titles ready for you yet.
And what kind of things will you be covering in those books, if you can reveal that?
So I have two other books in process, one on blockchain technology issues, and another one on the use of perspective in problem solving.
Oh, and what does that mean?
So if I applied it in the context of this book, if you wanted to think of a particular scenario, give it some particular context. So the adoption of a particular technology, whether from the product developer perspective or the consumer perspective or the regulator perspective, you can use all of those different perspectives as a tool to understand what potential issues you have. And if you think about it a little more carefully, you can actually redefine the problem you're trying to solve so that you solve a better problem. That's kind of the takeaway out of that book.
This book is, of course, called Ethics, Law and Technology Adoption, Navigating Technology Adoption Challenges. Where are all the places that it's available to have a read?
You can get it on Amazon. I believe they make it available to a global audience through their local stores.
Yes,
I think there are other distributors as well for the books as well. So
yes, there's no excuse not to get it. Really, most people can get it on Amazon and everything, can't they?
Yeah, if you Google it, I'm sure you'll find some suppliers.
Excellent. Well, many thanks for joining us today. It's been very interesting to talk to you.
Thank you, sir.